Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Victoria Mattingly, and this is Better Humans at Work. I am super thrilled to be joined today by none other than Abbey Salvas. So, Abbey is one of our amazing Team Mattingly staff. They are our in-house LGBTQ plus subject matter expert. But Abbey, you can do a way better job giving your intro because we've been working on our intros here at Mattingly. And so like lay
Yes,
it on us, Abby. Tell us who you are, what you're all about.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. V. My name is Abby. I am an assistant consultant here at Mattingly Solutions, serving as our LGBTQIA subject matter expert, like Dr. V said, working a lot on our blog and getting some content out that way. I'm also a doctoral candidate at George Washington University, getting my PhD in industrial organizational psychology. And my research area really focuses again on LGBTQIA employees at work, with a specific focus on trans and non-binary employees for my dissertation.
Lovely. And what do you do at Mattingly? So those out there know, how you help us execute our objectives here at the organization. And then how does your expertise and your research sometimes come, how are you able to leverage that at Mattingly, whether it's our customers or our audience?
Absolutely. So my primary responsibility at Mattingly is creating content for our blog. As far as using research to inform that, one of the things that both V and I are very passionate about, and everybody at Mattingly is passionate about, is translating science into actionable things that people can do, organizations can do, to create more inclusive environments for all of their employees. So definitely use my research experience to inform that, and really want to get that content out there. And another thing that I get to be involved in at Mattingly is working directly with clients. So we've actually had a couple of clients in the not so distant past who have come to us with trans employees and wanting to figure out the best ways to support them. So really using my research background as well as my lived experience, and just generally what we know about diversity and inclusion, to kind of inform that and really get that knowledge out there directly to clients.
I want to come back to the client story in a moment, but before that,
Absolutely.
I want to just call out like your work, and I think you did a really great job describing it. Is your work at Mattingly like you're so much more than a blog writer. Like the blogs are like that's the medium, right? Like that's how
Mhm.
we're delivering it, and a big part of that it's both business strategy, but it's also like, and you and I share this passion as well, just like getting this information out there. Like I've
Absolutely.
had a hell of a time trying to get published in HBR or Forbes or Inc. or like with these periodicals that our audience reads to
Mhm.
establish, our POV, our thought leadership, our framework into this space. And I can't do it. Like we're about to like
Mhm.
hire a PR firm to get this done. But with the blogs, there's no barrier to entry. And so we
Mhm.
can just get our ideas, our thought leadership, our examples, our guidance, our best practices just out there like immediately. And so it's so cool to like, as you said, use the science and use our like client experience and our backgrounds as organizational psychologists to like get this information out there. And something I want to highlight that you do really well is this translation piece where like
Mhm.
how can we take a super dense and, let's be honest, boring and dry research and find what's the one thing that's actually relevant to solving an organizational problem? What can we tell leaders or employees, to do based on this evidence that shows that this will result in better outcomes, right? And so you're getting that like education right now. This is why I love hiring like late stage PhD students at Mattingly, because like especially when you're like right on the comps time, like this is the most you
Mhm.
will ever know about. Because wherever you end up, and I hope it's at Mattingly forever, but wherever you end up, like you become niche, right? And so all those things that you learn from like a broad, like this is the breadth of our field, like you're not gonna have as much IO knowledge in your head as you do right now. And you get to like share that with Mattingly and share that with your audience. I'm just so grateful for you. So that translation piece, I don't think we're very good at it in our field. I think most scientific fields aren't, quite honestly. One field that really is sports science, which is interesting. Bruce Avolio, who is one of the transformational leadership, big in the leadership literature. He and I, he was like a mentor of mine for the summer I spent in Seattle because he's based in Seattle, and he was telling me sports medicine gets out there and it gets immediately applied. Like, you know, there was an article about the cupping and like a month later, like Michael Phelps was cupping, you know what I mean? Instant application. But with our field, oh, that gap, it just sucks, that scientist practitioner gap. And like the work you're doing at Mattingly is helping close that gap in a really substantial way. Like I was just on a training for one of our clients, and I shared a couple of your blogs out, you know, because like we're talking about those issues and we're informing the blog content from these client issues. Because I'll like plunk Abby a note in Slack and be like, our client just asked about, you know, this issue in the workplace. Let's make it a blog, you know. And so to be able to share that and have our clients use it, even just in that last training I did, even if just like 2 or 3 people at that company read that, that's 2 or 3 people that would ever read, and no offense, your dissertation or mine. No
anybody's.
Yeah, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk more about your dissertation. That was my translation call out. Thank you for translating our science into actionable, accessible ways that people can utilize it. Thank you. And the second thing is the client example. So you kind of talked about at a high level what that was, but can you talk about like what that experience was like for you and a little bit of background? So I knew that this was going to be the topic of conversation, was something about a trans employee with one of our clients. And I found this out like hours before the call. Abbey is very part-time. They have a lot of stuff going on. And so I'm never even sure the days you're working, you know, and so I'm like, I don't know if you're working today. I don't know if you have a moment, if you're free at this time, but I'd love for you to join this meeting because you have subject matter expertise in this area. So start there. What was your initial reaction to that ask? And then what was that experience like for you in an anonymous way, of course?
Of course. Yeah, I was very excited because again, we're all passionate about that translation piece, and I've been in the LGBTQ employees research space for about 3 years, but haven't gotten to do as much of that practical piece. So I was very excited, and the client hadn't said much in the initial communication. Was just saying that they had a trans employee and they didn't know how to support them through their transition. So going into that call, you know, thinking about, okay, do you have the systems in place for this person to, you know, make the changes on like a logistical level? Do you need training on the interpersonal level to best be able to, you know, have those inclusive behaviors in action? What exactly like do you need from us in order to be able to create an environment where this individual can thrive? And when we ended up talking to the client, it sounded like they had already done a lot of really good work. They had discussions with the individual about you know, gender neutral bathrooms and, you know, various policies that they were willing to implement and actively implemented, and were ready to support that individual in whatever way they needed. It ended up taking a little bit of a turn that neither you nor I expected, where the individual wasn't ready to make those steps, but that's okay. And we really got to reiterate that these things are about the individual. So if that person, you know, doesn't want to be out at work or doesn't need those systems yet, then we are never in a place that we're going to tell that person, no, you need to do it this way. But just making sure, like I said, those policies, those systems are in place, they're ready, because that person might eventually get to that point. And also, they're not the only one. They're not going to be your only trans employee. I think we're up to 1.4% of the population, but it's up to much higher for younger people as we become more accepting as a society. So these things are not going away. So establishing these policies as soon and as actively as you can, basing your actions in, inclusion and respect, are really the foundation to allow those people to thrive at work. So it was a great experience. I enjoyed it.
I was so glad to have you there. But like be pleasantly surprised how well it went. And also like validating how aligned we were with the advice, because as being especially like a cis hetero white woman in the DEI space, there's places where I have things to say and should say things, and there's places where I shouldn't be saying things. And it was an interesting balancing act because I always talk about DEI in terms of targeted universalism, right? So what are the universal things that we need to do across at whatever identity group, whatever initiative, whatever type of organization, right? What are the structures, leaders? How do we build ERGs, right? How do we hold leaders accountable for inclusive behavior, right? That's universal. But then there's all these like targeted approaches that, that's what equity is. Different groups need different resources. Success is going to look differently based on those groups. And so we need to have these targeted interventions that give that more identity specific expertise. And that all sounds nice. And there's like this bucket and that bucket, but like that conversation really was both at the same time, right? Because I was there as the DEI expert who doesn't have that lived experience or that deep research expertise, right? But I was able to say things like, you cannot force nor should not force someone's hand at how they transition, how quickly they transition, pronouns, name switch. You can't push that. Like that all is a very personal journey that someone needs to be on. And you need to just build the systems and the processes in such a way that allows for that flexibility. So like that systems and processes for flexibility, that's universal, right? But then to have you there and be like, well, research shows this and my experience is that, like that was just like it was so great to give them that like targeted universal 1-2 punch with our recommendations. And the fact that you and I were aligned with what those universal things should look like was also just like, okay, like I know I'm getting this right from a universal perspective, but am I getting the LGBTQ lens and targeted approach? And so I'm just so grateful to have you here, Mattingly, to like provide that. I also see that people are watching live, so thanks for being here live. If you have any questions for Abbey as our LGBTQ expert, as someone who has really good research and perspectives on supporting and empowering trans and non-binary employees in the workplace, please send some questions over. We can answer those live, which is super fun. And then I did want to go back to a stat you shared, Abbey. You said 1.4 of the U.S. population or the world population? I didn't know.
I believe it's the U.S. population, and I'll have to double check my numbers. Don't have them off the top, but I think it was 1.8. And I think that number jumps all the way to 5% for people between the ages of 18 and 25. So if you think about that, the next generation of your workforce, the people that you are hiring right now, 1 in 5 or 1 in 20 of those individuals identifies as trans and is in need of these systems, these policies that are going to provide them with support, empower them, enable them to be, their most authentic self at work and feel comfortable and safe doing so.
This is such a great example of something I say all the time, which is, millennials on average, and we can talk about generational differences. Thank you for using age and not just Gen Z. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
But for our clients and our audience, it's just sometimes helpful for that heuristic, that shortcut to talk about generation. So what I like to say is millennials on average want DEI for companies that they work for. Gen Z is demanding it.
Exactly.
Demanding it. And I think when I say that, I bet it often gets interpreted as like a political statement, like, Gen Z's woke and they're going to demand it. And this is like their principles. And it's at the end of the day, I mean, sure, but it's this. It's
Right.
this. It's the fact that 5% of those in this kind of Gen Z bucket are trans. They're not needing DEI because it's their political agenda. They're needing DEI because they need to make sure they have the bathrooms they need, have the ability to express pronouns in a safe way, having the systems in place if there are transitions. You know what I mean? Like this is not political. This is
Right.
practical. This is
Right.
operational. Like this is
Right.
just sheer how do we take care of our people, and you need to know who your people are, and this stat is just like
Exactly.
super powerful to me, and it really illuminates like that point that I'm trying to bring across all the time. So
Absolutely. And I think kind of jumping off of that, something that we've been talking about at Mattingly recently is this idea around disclosure. So, this survey was conducted, and that's how we get this number. But I mean, so many people, in a survey that they're just getting, as an individual, or a survey that they're getting as an employee, are not going to feel comfortable disclosing that identity if they are not in an environment where they feel it is safe to do so. So that disclosure piece is really important because I feel so often we hear from organizations, well, we don't have any trans employees, we don't have any LGBTQ employees. Well, are you collecting that data? Are you empowering your employees to respond and know that they will be kept safe, that their answers will be confidential and only be used to inform a better workplace, not to come back to bite them in any way? So I think that's a really important point that so often we miss when we talk about LGBTQ employees at work.
so you just mentioned, you started kind of giving some examples too, but a big part of that disclosure piece, and I'm making this argument now, for a position I'm running for. I should just plug it. I'm going to campaign. I am running for the executive board in SIOP, the Society of Biopsychology. And a big part of that is, oh my gosh, I just lost the train of thought. It's because I got distracted by campaign. I take it all back. I'm going to edit
We were talking about disclosure.
Oh my goodness, disclosure. Oh, we're missing a ton of data, which is like so
Yes.
sad, and like there's lots of reasons for that. Like there's what you're talking about, like creating that safe space, the fear, the identity piece. And so getting back to that, like how do we increase that trust, that feeling of safety? Because I know it's like a very discrete example. Like how do you get people just to like disclose and put it on a survey, but it's so
Right.
much bigger than that,
Right.
like, because you can't advocate for yourself if you don't have at least some degree of disclosure of what you're advocating for. And so, like, what can leaders, I think, especially like people leaders and supervisors, or like even from an organizational like policy standpoint, do to like foster those safe spaces for disclosure, especially for the trans and non-binary communities?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Something that, I always come back to as a data first kind of person is, why are you collecting the data? And if you're going to ask somebody to disclose something that is personal to them and that might be hard for them to share, I think the bare minimum you can do is tell them why. And then tell them what you're going to do with it and how you're going to keep them safe. I think that having those kinds of policies in place, that's that targeted universalism, where whenever you're collecting this kind of information, having some kind of policy that's available, or even just a note on your survey that says, this is what we're doing, this is why we're asking you this, and always making it optional. You cannot force people to disclose because that breaks the trust immediately. I just lost my train of thought. As far as creating a space for trans employees, especially, there we go. I think that gets back to what I was talking about before, in that you can create these policies and these mechanisms and express your vocal support before anybody discloses, right? again, getting back to, well, we don't have any trans employees here. You probably do. So what can you do right now to say, especially given the current political moment, what can you say to say, we support our trans employees, we support trans people, and this is what we're doing. This is how, if you're trans, you will be supported and protected here at our organization. This is what our organization stands for. I think that those steps, both like very practically within the survey and within your policies, creating transparency there. And then also at the organizational level, what are you doing to express that this is an environment where you should feel safe, you should feel supported, so that disclosure is not something that you need to think twice about, because you know that we are here to support and advocate for you.
I love that. And it reminds me of something I was just talking about in the allyship workshop I was giving, which is this concept of like big A and little a allyship. So I stole this from the innovation space because, like, innovation, they talk about big I and little I innovation. And so, like, big I innovation is like the iPhone, and little I innovation is like finding a way, like figuring out if I brush my teeth in the shower, I'll save 3 minutes from my get ready time, right? But it takes all the little I's to eventually lead to the big I, and I see the same thing with allyship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and especially in this context. And so an example you shared was putting out that statement explicitly. And this is how we treat our trans employees. And this is how we're making sure that people have what they need and they feel safe to just come and show up to work. What's so ironic about DEI is that people act like it's like this extra thing. And it's like, I don't want to talk about these things. I just want to get to work. I just want to work. Right. And at the end of the day, all DEI is doing is just making it easier for people to get to work. If we don't have to deal with all this like bull of like, being discriminated against or not having the resources I need or all this like barriers, like I could just get my freaking work done. It's so ironic. But back to big A, little A allyship. And so like with little A allyship, what you said about like, just verbally making a stance, like communicating, even just using words. Oh my, like, right. Even just, I gave a training the other night and it was about, it was a code of conduct training. It was really cool because it was a service industry audience, and we usually work with corporate. And so even just having the words on the screen and talking through what is cisgender, what does it mean to be a trans man or a trans woman, kind of like, and not only was it a good like education moment, but I'm trying to normalize the use of these terms. So it's just another way of these like little A allyship moments that we're just making a safer space to be like, hey, like we can get what these words mean. And I'm calling myself a cis woman, I'm showing that like the fact that my how I look matches how I identify, like isn't just taking the assumption of like that's the norm, right? And so I don't know, there's like the little things, and then there's the big things, as you said, like what are the policies and practices in place, what are the systems set up, so like you need both to really do work well. But I think sometimes like the little stuff, because like the example, like the statement, like a lot of people get lambasted for statements, especially when there's no, like there needs to be, they need to follow through with what they say on the statement, like that's like duh, statement 101. And this is an example where having a statement is part of the work. It is one of the actions. It's not the only action, but it is one of them, because you have to explicitly say these things. You can't just assume, well, our trans employees, they know that we care about them. Do they? Like, do they? Did you tell them? Like, I don't know. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit with DEI. And like, I think people get so hung up on those boulders, but at the end of the day, like we need to be chipping away. We're chipping away as we're pushing boulders. And so I digress though. Okay, so I could talk about this stuff all day. I want to get a little bit into your research. And so you're in a very important stage of the PhD process right now. So where are you at? What are you researching? What's your project?
Absolutely. So I have at this point proposed my dissertation, and it's been approved. So I actually just started recruiting for my dissertation studies. So I was particularly interested in experiences of authenticity at work. So often in the DEI space and in the DEI research space, We talk about how important it is for employees to bring their most authentic self to work and all of the benefits that come along with that. You know, if employees are authentic, they're more engaged, they're more productive, they're happier to be at work, they're more committed to their organization. But is that true? Is it true for every member of your organization? If, you know, a trans woman comes to work as her most authentic self, is she going to get the same benefits, or is she going to experience, you know, discrimination and harassment and all of those things that we know are really bad for being at work? So my study is focusing on experiences of authenticity for trans and non-binary folks, looking at it across a 2-week work week schedule, seeing how these things fluctuate every day. So really excited. My link for the eligibility survey is in the comments here. If you're interested, we're looking for trans or non-binary working adults, working at least 30 hours a week, at least 18 years old, access to a smartphone, and living and working in the US are the eligibility criteria. So really excited about that. This population is understudied, and so often it's because people say, well, there's just not enough of them, but we've had that conversation already. And I've been lucky enough, I posted my recruitment flyer yesterday and I've already had over 100 people sign up, which is incredibly exciting. Really fills me with joy, because that means that these trans folks are out there and they want to be involved. And my study is kind of a little labor intensive. They got to fill out 2 surveys every day for 2 weeks, and we have people, you know, chomping at the bit to be involved. So this population needs to be researched, needs to be understood, and I'm really excited about this project.
That is so exciting. Okay, so first off, what's your goal with recruitment?
I would like to hit 250.
250. Okay, so you're like almost halfway there
in less than 24 hours.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Yes. Thank
That's
you so
wonderful. But also, you know, there's attrition. So
yes,
for the non-research out there, just having the 250 doesn't mean she'll have that number at the end. People drop out. So yeah, help her out or help them out. You know what I mean? You know, we had this conversation today. Help a human out. I digress. Offline conversation. Okay, so comment the links in the comments, so be sure to check that out. And then I had one more. Oh, here's my question, looking all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, Abby. Translation. So it's a year from now, a year and a half from now, and your study's done, it's published, you are Dr. Abbey Salvas, which is amazing. And you want to share out, I at Mattingly, you're still at Mattingly, and we want to share out the TLDR, like what did you learn? And so say it's a one little graphic that you're scrolling by on LinkedIn and it says, here are 3 things, blah, 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 that you can apply to the workplace. What would those 3 things be?
Absolutely. So for me, the foundation for this study, the first thing that really drew me to authenticity was the importance of social support. So if individuals are expressing themselves authentically, are they receiving that social support? And then what does that social support look like? So really the call to action here, or the takeaway, would be, how are you approaching your interactions with your trans and non-binary coworkers or subordinates, with empathy and respect, treating them with the support that they need to do their job, but also the support that they need to feel affirmed. So it's not just, okay, well, you look like that today, whatever, here's what you need to do your job, but, you know, supporting them, being like, you know what, you look great today, or using the pronouns that they need, or that are theirs. Supporting them in that way on the interpersonal level, I think, would be the first thing. And again, that's what really drove me to this research, was the importance of that social support. The second would be at the organizational level. Are those policies in place, like we've been talking about? Do your employees feel psychologically safe? Do they feel like the opportunity to be their authentic self will be treated at the organizational level appropriately? Do you have a culture in which that freedom is there and people feel supported? That's really that higher level there. And then really the third thing, and this is so much a part of my dissertation, but just something that I think is really important, is elevating the voices of the trans people in your organization and hearing what they have to say and doing what you can to express that support like we've talked about. The current environment for trans people in this country is scary and terrifying and alarming in a lot of ways. So what are you doing to protect people? And this can be, big A allyship. Companies like Indeed and even the US Air Force offered relocation stipends for their employees that were located in states where trans people came under attack. So they were given the opportunity to leave so they could go to a state where they would be able to access the care that they need. So whether it's something like that, or whether it's, publicly advocating in some way for your trans employees, those steps that you can take one step outside of your organization or loudly as an organization to really elevate that you don't see this issue as something that's peripheral to what you do as an organization, not peripheral to being an organization or peripheral to work like we were talking about. This is central and this is important. And, these people in your organization and outside of your organization are a priority.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great summary. What great pointers to help those out there that really want to support and more than just support, like empower,
Yes.
like it's more than just, I accept you because you look the way you look today. It's like, hey, you look awesome today. Or that's like, you are rocking that suit. Those earrings look fabulous. Like, and mean it. Like, I think authenticity, it goes both ways too. Your study is going to look at authenticity of those who identify as trans and non-binary in the workplace. But what about those, and this is a different study. I'm not saying add more variables to your study, but like, how authentic are the people who are interacting with those from this community? Right. Because that people see that. People see right through that if someone's being sincere or not. If you're just trying to be some woke ally, like it's people around look right through that. Be authentic. And like the empathy piece is so important that you said too. Like you shouldn't have to either be trans or non-binary or have a trans or binary son or daughter or human child. There you go, child. But like we shouldn't have to have this proximity to care.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, you were going to say something, Abby.
Yeah, it was just so much of it also comes when the person's not there, and I think that that's really important. So that little A allyship or that empathy and that support. So rarely are we talking about people in front of them. So a lot of the times it's happening when that person's not present. So what are you doing to advocate for those people who aren't in the room, but their identity, their pronouns, and you hear that happening? What are you doing to stand up and be like, actually, they use they, them pronouns, or she uses she, her pronouns, and correcting that as it happens because that person's not there to do it for themselves. I think that that's a really important, and I would say relatively easy tip for things that you can do to help and support your trans coworkers.
And, recognizing that everyone messes it up. Like, I feel like the purpose of inclusion is not to get it right. I think that's where we're getting lost in the conversation too. Like, I can't be perfect. I can't keep up with this. It's like, no, like we're all going to mess up. The purpose of this work is to like know what to do when we mess it up because we're only human. And even before I used the wrong pronoun with you on this freaking call, I made sure to jump right back in and keep going, and so rather than lambasting myself and making a big deal of making it super awkward, it's like you just gotta keep plowing through,
That's exactly what it is everybody's going to make mistakes, and nobody is looking to yell at you or be mad at you. They're just looking to be treated with empathy and respect. So if you do make mistakes, exactly like you did, you just correct yourself and you move on, just like you would for any other mistake. As soon as you make it into something larger than it is, then you're putting a lot of unnecessary pressure on the other person, and just making the situation worse. So always better to just, take it as it is, make the mistake, move on, and like you said, remember that we're all just trying to come to work. Like we're not looking for perfection. We're not looking for, flawlessness. It's just about coming to work and feeling supported, respected, and that your identity can be authentic there, and there won't be any downsides to that.
Abby, I'm so grateful for you. I thank the universe every day that they brought these amazing people into Mattingly, and just that your willingness and generosity to share what you're learning, what you're doing, your passion for this work, your own experiences. So thank you for everything you do to make life better for humans at work. Now, your study, so those who identify as trans or non-binary, there's some additional criteria too if you go on this link, but be sure if you are trans or non-binary or know someone who is that might be interested in participating. We're looking for another, let's say 200, not
All right.
150. We can do it. Then the link's also in the comments. Abby, if someone wanted to get a hold of you for another reason, like how do you recommend people reaching out?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Abbey Salvas. Happy to connect there. And if you have questions about the study, my email is all over all of the flyers and LinkedIn posts and everything there. So happy to answer any questions. Yeah, looking forward to connecting.
Thank you so much, and thanks for
Thank you.
everything you do and our viewers out there tuning in to make